Well, hello there. You're watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with the broadcaster and journalist Jenny Kleeman and the deputy editor of Conservative Home, Henry Hill. Lovely to see you both. So as ever, let us check out the front pages, starting with the Telegraph, which reports on the collapse of the second summit between Presidents Trump and Putin over Moscow's refusal to freeze the front lines in Ukraine. Grooming gangs inquiry in chaos, according to the Daily Mail, as a potential chair and 3 survivors resign over cover-up fears. On the front page of the Metro is the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson admitting to failing children during the COVID-19 lockdowns. The Times reports that the Chancellor is planning a £2 billion tax raid on the middle class to fill a hole in public finances. The Eye says benefits are set to rise by 4%, adding pressure on the Chancellor Rachel Reeves before the budget. Financial Times writes Bailey hears alarm bells over private credit after big US corporate failures, with the Bank of England boss saying he sees parallels with the 2008 financial crisis. The Guardian writes about a victory for children facing domestic abuse as courts will no longer rule that contact with both parents is for the best. Justice shouldn't have an expiry. The sister of murdered Sasha Marsden issues a plea on the front of the Express, calling for MPs to scrap a 28-day limit on appeals against lenient sentences. Britain isn't broken. You were all amazing. The Prime Minister hosts this year's Pride of Britain award winners. So let's bring in our guests then tonight, Jenny Kleeman and Henry Hill. Welcome to both of you. We're going to come on all to that budget-related stuff in a moment, but first of all to the Daily Telegraph and the hopes of a second summit, Putin, Trump, Budapest, off the cards for the moment, Henry.
Yeah, so the Daily Telegraph says Putin defies Trump as peace talks collapse. The idea seems to be that Russia has rejected America's terms. You can read both columns of this story and not find out what America's terms are, but essentially it's more the story that people have once again realised that Russia really actually means its stated war aims, which have not changed since the beginning of the operation. As far as Putin is prepared to go is essentially that if Ukraine, there are 4 oblasts or provinces of Ukraine that are currently being fought over. If Ukraine withdraws entirely from the 2 which Russia has almost got, it will cede its claim over not the whole of the other 2, but the sections of the other 2 that it hasn't got yet, essentially. And so that would turn the front line into the current international border, more or less. Now, the Ukrainian government is very, very clear that it does not intend to cede any territory. In fact, I think Ukraine's war aims are the restitution of Ukraine's 1992 borders, including Crimea, which is a very ambitious objective at this stage, but it remains nonetheless the basis of what they want. And it is a fact that no matter how Trump, last time I was on here, we were talking about Trump making peace in the Middle East. No matter how much he really wants to be able to go around the world ending his 9th war, or whatever it is that he's saying it is. Unfortunately, Ukraine and Russia are a million miles apart when it comes to the terms, and so until that changes, the fighting will continue.
Yes, and, the word from what we heard in the FT yesterday and other officials in the room is that Zelensky brought Trump back from giving up the whole of the Donbass to stopping at the current battle lines, which would leave 25% of Donetsk, one of those 4 oblasts you've mentioned, which is where they've really fortified. They call it the fortress area. And that's the bit that would stop Putin having another nibble in 5 or 10 years, should he choose to, after this current war.
And why should they trust Putin, after all? I mean, they trusted him in 2014, and here we are. There was this testy meeting between Zelensky and Trump over this question. Trump reportedly pressurising Zelensky to surrender the Donetsk region to Russia. And that followed. Then this week, there were exchanges between Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, and Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister. And Marco Rubio is kind of known for being a lot more hawkish and perhaps less friendly towards Putin and the Kremlin in general than Trump. So maybe something has gone on. I think that's the general thinking, is that something has gone on in those exchanges between Lavrov and Rubio that have meant that this Hungary summit is off the cards for now.
Yes, and Volodymyr Zelensky making clear that as soon as you remove the threat of Tomahawk missiles being sent to bolster Ukrainian action, then the Russians lose interest. So it's classic Putin delaying tactics to promise another summit and scupper that Friday meeting between Zelensky and Trump.
Yeah, I think the Tomahawks are the latest in a series of sort of wonder weapons that have been eventually promised and given to Ukraine. The challenge with Tomahawks is that mostly they're ship-launched missiles and Ukraine doesn't have any ships, and there are about, in total, 6 of the land launchers on Earth. And so America's willingness to hand those over is an open question. The challenge on the fortress thing is essentially, after 2014, when Russia occupied about half of each of the relevant, the 2 oblasts, Luhansk and Donetsk, Ukraine had a whole string of fortresses, right? Avdiivka, obviously, they're right up at Donetsk city, and they've all fallen over the last couple of years. I think Pokrovsk is the latest one that's just been sort of scratched off. And so really, there's only one agglomeration left in northeastern Donetsk, which is the bit that Ukraine is holding out on. But on present performance, Russia is going to take that. It is advancing on the front at a rate that it hasn't since the start of the war. Ukraine's conscription age has crept up into the sort of late 40s, early 50s at this point. And so I think the question is, for any Western backer of Ukraine is, OK, it's all very well saying we reject Putin's terms, fine, but, like, are you actually going to give Ukraine something that will actually allow it to change the facts on the ground? Because if you're not, all you're really doing is stalling out the inevitable.
Yes, and Zelensky coming to Western Europe towards the end of the week. We know another meeting of the coalition of the willing, you know, how much the Europeans can persuade Donald Trump to listen and take action elsewhere, you know, will remain to be seen, as they say, but we'll keep an eye on that. Now, should we move on to the budget? How long have we got to go? How long have we been talking about this for? Anyway, so she's scratching around the edges again for money.
Yes.
Amidst inflation figures out tomorrow, which look ugly, let's be honest. 4% is anticipated, up from 3.8%. That is the figure for September, which has implications, as we can see from this headline, in the eye.
Yes, and this is amid a whole bunch of bad news about borrowing that has come out today, that the cost of borrowing in September, borrowing cost £20 billion. It's a record high for the last 5 years. It hasn't been that high, and that's because the cost of borrowing is so much, and there's just not enough coming in terms of increased taxes. So we're continuing to borrow. We're borrowing at record levels. It is not looking good for Rachel Reeves. She is continuing to kind of nibble around the edges, and again, we're in this situation where for weeks and months in advance of the budget, we are all second-guessing what is she going to do next, which is, of course, the antithesis of growth, which is what the government has staked its entire economic strategy on. Benefits are going to go up by 4%, which is lower than the increase in state pension. But this is all, again, tied to inflation. It's a kind of nightmare balancing act. There is no kind of bold vision of how to get out of this. And again, you know, it's story after story of where she's going to be kind of nibbling around the edges to make the books balance.
And the problem is that the 4% increase in inflation, you know, it's higher than others, you know, like-minded nations, let's put it that way. And is that down to the change in employers' national insurance and the amount people are spending now? And that's passed on to consumers. Is that partly what it's about, or is it the economic, or sort of the global headwinds that she talks about?
I mean, the exact role of the employer's national insurance contribution in inflation is sadly slightly beyond me, and I'm not going to pretend, for the purposes of the audience, that I could give you a detailed answer. But I think essentially the government always pleads. Any government that's in power always pleads international headwinds, right? And and the opposition always point out that it's things that the specific government has done. I think for a government that has explicitly stated that its number one priority is growth, its governing strategy hasn't really reflected this, because on growth, there is actually a fairly strong consensus about what you do for growth. It's basically a sliding scale. You have sort of less regulation and lower taxes and growth goes up, but you have more inequality, or you start sliding the scale the other way. And this government has not started sliding the scale down towards the growth end of the spectrum. They're bringing in new employment rights bills, they're bringing in new regulation on tenancies and all kinds of other things, which is leading to effectively stagnation and this kind of zero-sum politics, which Labour is now stuck with, which is essentially, you know, absent other things, welfare goes up, it goes up by inflation, but it also just tends to go up. Absent cuts, you've got the pension, you've got the NHS, goes up, social care goes up. And so every single budget, effectively, Rachel Reeves has to come back and find yet more money from somewhere else, not to deliver a breakout into new and higher ground, whoever it was who said that, but simply to get through the next 6 months.
Yeah, well, I mean, the debt interest alone, you know, isn't covered by the tax increases. Yeah. You know, it becomes that sort of cycle, doesn't it? Yeah. In the meantime, the Daily Telegraph, if we go back to that paper, suggests that Rachel Reeves is considering a tax raid on GPs and lawyers to fill this hole, however big the OBR eventually says it is.
Yes, another bit of kind of nibbling around the edges. This is a charge on LLPs, limited liability partnerships, so the sort of GP practices, legal practices, apparently they're not subject to employers' national insurance.
It's the lead for the Times as well, so that's a bit bigger. Maybe we'll put that in, but you do carry on.
But
yeah.
it's you know, they've seen a gap here. They've not been paying their employers' national insurance contributions. They're hoping to get a bit more there. But again, this is just sort of tinkering around at edges of a sort of giant problem. The Telegraph pointing out that the UK borrowed almost £100 billion in the first half of the financial year, the highest amount since the pandemic, at a time when the cost of borrowing is very high. There's no big ideas to solve this problem, and there has kind of been no good news really from Rachel Reeves since she took power, and so you do have to wonder, what's going to give in all of this. It's just sort of tiny little depressing thing after tiny little depressing thing, and that is the antithesis of growth, really, isn't it?
Yeah, there we go. The Chancellor plans a £2 billion tax raid on the middle class, aka those lawyers and GPs that we talked about there. The Chancellor is expected to use the budget to impose a new charge on people who use, as you said, limited liability partnerships. In the meantime, what is to blame for all of it? Takes us to The Guardian. Other decisions made by others. Anyway, yes, what's the answer?
According to the Chancellor, it's a combination of...
right-hand column, yeah.
Yeah, it's a combination of Brexit, obviously that happened just over 5 years ago, and austerity, which happened about 15 years ago. And these are both responsible for economic weakness, which Rachel Reeves could not foresee before she was elected as Chancellor in 2024. Whether or not the audience their mileage may vary on how much that's true. I think the reason that Reeves keeps having to do this sort of miserable act where she comes back and finds yet more money is because essentially the OBR gives a spending envelope based, in fairness, on what the government tells it, essentially. And every single time since she's come in, Rachel Reeves has spent all of it. She's left herself very, very little, it's called headroom, right? You're probably sick of the word, but it's the headroom. She's left herself far less than did Jeremy Hunt. And I think in one of the economic and fiscal outlooks, the OBR gave her something like a 50.1% chance of fulfilling one of her objectives and a 49.8% chance of fulfilling the other one. And the problem with that is it means that every single time anything goes wrong at all, so, Donald Trump gets elected, Donald Trump tries to do tariffs, the war in Ukraine goes badly, there's a war in the Middle East. Any time any of these things happens, or indeed anything at all, her numbers are off, and there's a black hole, and she has to fill it. And I think that the unfortunate thing about that, whatever the bigger economic picture, is that it's corrosive of public trust, because Labour were elected saying they wouldn't do any of these taxes. Then, when they first broke that promise, they were explicit. Rachel Reeves, I think, was in front of a select committee saying this is the only time this will happen. It's like, it's not. And instead of levelling with the public, they keep saying it's some new thing, or in this case, two very old things. And having to come back over and over again.
Just very quickly, Jenny, we're running over.
I would say these two very old things, you can very much make a very strong argument that they are to blame. The problem is that the Labour Party, when they were campaigning for government, had no guts about Brexit and couldn't make this point beforehand. And now they're in government, that's what they're blaming. So, again, all of this shows a lack of courage, I would say.
She is shocked to find that we've left the European Union.
Lots more stuff to come in the next part of our programme, including this take on Prince Andrew's predicament on the front page of The Sun. Its headline, "Off You Trot, Mr. Windsor." That in just a moment.
Those vivid colours of summer have faded now, but the trauma for everyone who witnessed what happened here hasn't gone away.
Devastation that we lost 3 of them.
Ruda Cabana's guilty pleas mean they won't have to relive what they saw in court, but everyone here tells you they'll carry it for the rest of their lives. You see people running red lights time after time after time. This is an offence that sometimes has the most awful of consequences.
When you speed through a pedestrian crossing, there is a risk that you could batter somebody to death. She filled our lives with light. She was innocent, she was happy.
I'm Greg Milam and I'm Sky's Chief North of England correspondent.
He had a beautiful death. He fell asleep in my arms. This is about a dying person's choice to die peacefully when they want to, on their terms.
Go ahead. back white jacket.
Deborah Haynes from Sky News. He called you Daddy earlier.
No, he did it very affectionately. Daddy, you're my daddy. Thank you.
Leicester is on its knees.
They've ripped the soul out of my factory and there's nothing left.
It is eerily quiet.
It's constantly on the brink of capacity.
There's overcrowding. It's not a new thing.
It's rough.
There's nothing to hide. Why aren't international journalists allowed in?
Are you worried about escalation?
Of course I'm worried about escalation, which is why my focus is on de-escalation.
The region, I think, is on edge because they are anticipating a retaliation.
Iran retaliates for the US attacks.
The founding principle of the alliance, that an attack on one is an attack on all.
Could Putin attack another NATO country within 5 years?
I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Over the next 45 days, an estimated 400 million Hindu pilgrims are expected to converge here in Prayagraj on the banks of the holy river Ganga and Yamuna. Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional. This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party. We take you to the heart of the story in the largest democracy in the world.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
I witnessed the complete destruction of a place linked to my childhood memories.
This is insane.
I'm Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky's Africa correspondent based in Johannesburg, South Africa. I felt awe when we saw the mountain gorillas in Rwanda.
We call him the king of the jungle. This is the alpha silverback.
Sky News, get the full story first.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview with me once again, the broadcaster and journalist Jenny Kleeman and the deputy editor at Conservative Home, Henry Hill. Welcome back to both of you. Jenny, let's go to the Daily Mail, shall we? This grooming gangs inquiry in chaos, 3 resignations of survivors, a potential chair also stepping aside.
Yes, I mean, the fact that these 3 survivors have resigned before the inquiry's begun, before they were appointed a chair, is not good. Who can blame these women for not having faith in the system? But they believe that the outcomes have been kind of shaped in advance. They didn't like the idea that it's a former police officer and a former social worker who'd been suggested as the chair. The woman who's a former social worker is now withdrawn from the process because of the press scrutiny that she has encountered. I mean, who would want to chair this inquiry? And this is a politically difficult situation. You had Chris Philp today, giving the Conservative line, which is that the government never wanted this inquiry, they were forced into it. Any perception that this inquiry is anything but entirely free to inquire, that there have been anything judged in advance, that it's been prejudiced in any way, that it's not on the side of the victims, is very, very dangerous, not just for the process, but also for the government itself. And, there are victims today who are really angry about what Jess Phillips has said on behalf of the government about how it's not true, that it's various things that they have said.
The focus has grown, for example.
The focus has grown, which they don't want the focus to be broadened out. They want the focus to be very much on grooming gangs. And those survivors who have now said they don't want to be part of the process have taken this as a personal attack on them.
OK, let's just whiz past the Daily Telegraph and show the picture story on their colour. Bruni Sarkozy showing her gratitude to supporters of her husband, Nicolas Sarkozy, who's off to jail for 5 years. The former French president found guilty of seeking to acquire Libyan funding for his 2007 presidential campaign. But it is to the Sun we go now. Off you trot, Mr Windsor calls to kick Andy from Royal Lodge. Just very quickly, both of you, apologies.
Essentially, Prince Andrew, as he remains, has been stripped of all of his other royal titles, and in the wake of a whole heap of developments, is effectively the fair question is being asked about whether or not he should still get a free 30-bedroom house from the government.
Yes, well, he's effectively still living the life of a prince in this house in Royal Lodge. It feels like crunch time for him. Today you had Robert Jenrick, you had Peter Kyle, you had Rachel Reeves, all coming out quite critically of him. The memoir, Virginia Giuffre's memoir, came out today. It feels unsustainable that he's going to be able to continue to live the life of a prince, even if he's no longer Knight of the Garter, or whatever title that is that he was forced to give up.
Jenny.
Dukedom, I think.
Dukedom, well, and all the rest, yes.
Yes, indeed. Jenny and Henry, thank you both very much indeed. Thank you. See you in the 11. Right now, let's catch up with the weather. And there'll be a spell of wind and rain later tomorrow and Thursday, with colder, more showery conditions following. Most places will have a fine start tomorrow, if chilly. Patchy ground frost in the countryside, perhaps some fog. Staying largely dry through the morning with plenty of sunshine. Northwest, though, can expect a few showers. Southern and western Scotland and the northwest of Ireland look most at risk. By lunchtime, cloud and rain will move into the far southwest. Temperatures near average, strong winds for northern Scotland. And then the afternoon will see rain, locally heavy, spreading across parts of Ireland and southwest Britain. Most other places, though, staying fine. Well, our press preview continues in Sky News at 11. Donald Trump says his planned meeting with President Putin is now on hold. That and the rest of the day's stories coming up after this.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling.
It's not his country, it's ours.
Sky News, the full story first, free wherever you get your news. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in